I'll have to say this lesson, if you all read the devotional this morning, is about the Gospel of John, which Penn talks about, is but written to some of the first early Jewish converts to Christianity, and like delves perfectly into what we're going to be talking about today. So go and read that, and you'll see how far or not far we've come in 2,000 plus years. And then also leads perfectly into Zionism and the beginnings of Christianity, which we'll talk about in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to end today talking a little tiny second about Christian Zionism, which is different than Zionism, the political Israeli part of Zionism, but they go together in some ways. So I hope I'll set you guys up. Are they here?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I hope yeah.
Just mention a little bit what we're doing next week. Ed and I are in a book club, men's book club in our condo building across the street. And we read a book, two books recently. One on the history of Israel and the current conflict, not the current conflict, but the conflict that's developed there, and one on the history of Palestine. And so there's an Israeli and a Palestinian author. We picked them both because they were on the New York Times paperback bestsellers list about 6 weeks ago. So our book club read them, and it was fascinating really to see the dual histories in that area of the world and its different perspectives from these two different authors. So we're going to attempt to share that with you next week, with Ed dealing with the Israeli perspective, and I'm going to deal with the Palestinian perspective. So that's kind of an overview. So you can decide to sleep in or.
I'm glad to be.
We're gonna do all this in about 45 minutes.
Yeah, I'm glad to be out of the fray of that one. So we can go ahead and go down to the next slide. Today we're going to talk about Messianic Judaism. Does anybody here know what Messianic Judaism is? Anybody heard of it? A cousin of my family's husband has converted. They're Southern Baptist, and he converted to Messianic Judaism, which is kind of how I heard about it a little bit. I'd heard about it a little bit before, but fascinated. So I went down the rabbit hole, and you get to see what I did. This is the logo for the Messianic Judaism faith. Obviously, they put together a lot of fish from Christianity, the Star of David, and the Hanukkah candles. So is it Jewish or Christian? It's complicated. So we're going to get into it a little bit. Next slide. So I think everybody knows this, but I kind of wanted to start with a definition of Jewish versus Judaism. Oops, sorry. You should push that little arrow on the bottom. Let's see. Let's go back. There we go. So just push this arrow on the bottom. It's right there. Yeah. Okay. So Judaism versus Jewish. Jews or Jewish people are an ethno-religious group who obviously are biblical, and they come from the Near East, whose traditional religion is Judaism. But Judaism or Jewish people are an ethnicity, a religion, and a community. Although not all Jewish people practice Judaism, most Jews would say if you practice Judaism, you should be ethnically Jewish. So it's kind of a closed religion in that respect. Judaism shares some of the characteristics of a nation, an ethnicity, a religion, and a culture. And the definition of who is a Jew, like I said, depends on who you're talking to and what you're talking about. So that clears mud. Okay, so let's just watch this quick video. This is, just to set it up, this is a Messianic Jewish rabbi who's going to give us a brief overview of Messianic Judaism, and then we're going to delve into the details.
Shalom, friends. One of the questions that was asked, it's a great question, is what is Messianic Judaism and what is a Messianic Jew? I know that sometimes people get confused when they hear that I'm a rabbi and they think about a Jewish person who does not believe in Jesus, who's a teacher or scholar. But I want you to think about it for a moment. All the first followers of Jesus were Jewish. Every major event in the life of Jesus happened on a Jewish holiday. He celebrated all of the Jewish holidays. He was called rabbi. He was worshiping in the synagogue. He came to fulfill the Torah and the prophets. And his disciples lived the exact same way. They honored the Jewish history and heritage of the Hebrew scriptures, and that is exactly what a Messianic Jew is, except in a modern day context. We seek to express our faith in Yeshua, that's Jesus' Hebrew name, as the Messiah, in a way that honors the history and the heritage and the tradition of our ancestors, of the Jewish people. So it's a coming together of the old and the new in a way that lifts up and honors Yeshua. It's expressing our faith very much in the same way that Jesus and the first disciples expressed theirs. So maybe it's worshiping on the traditional Shabbat, or keeping of the Jewish holidays, or praying in Hebrew, or different things along those lines. There's different levels of observance among Messianic followers of Yeshua. Now, a Messianic Jew is a Jewish person, is someone who is born of a Jewish parent who believes in Yeshua, but they're also Messianic Gentiles. Those are people who are not born of Jewish parents, but yet also honor the Jewish heritage and tradition because they've been grafted in, what Paul talks about in Romans chapter 11, the wild olive branches being grafted into the Jewish olive tree, to the Jewish roots of the faith. And God loves the different expressions. One is not better than the other, but they're meant to complement each other, and we are meant to learn from one another. So hope that's helpful. And if you want to continue learning with us and going deeper and understanding how,
So that's a really good introduction, I think, to Messianic Judaism. So the definition of Messianic Judaism is a Jewish, ethnically Jewish person who believes that Jesus was the Messiah. And again, we'll get into the depths of it. That is generally what it is. And you ask, how did my Southern Baptist cousin's husband become a Messianic Jew? He's technically not, as he said, he's considered a Messianic Gentile, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But the background of Messianic Judaism, obviously, if you read the devotional today, it started with Jesus. Like, those were Messianic Jews. They were people who were Jewish by ethnicity, followed Jesus, practiced all the laws of Israel. Fast forward almost 2,000 years. Have you all heard of, oh, we can go to the next slide. Sorry, Gerald. Have you heard of Jews for Jesus? That happened in the 70s. There was this gentleman, Martin Moishe Rosen, who was born Jewish but became a Christian after marriage. He was a part of the Conservative Baptist Association. And in 1973, he started Jews for Jesus, which was an early kind of popular version of Messianic Judaism. And part of what Moishe Rosen was trying to do was evangelize Christianity to his family, his friends, his Jewish family and friends. So those who identify as Messianic Jews adhere to conventional Christian beliefs, including salvation and faith in Jesus, referred to, like he said, by Yeshua is how they say Jesus. And they believe he is the Jewish Messiah. And they include the Old and New Testament. They also believe he's the Son of God. I mean, it's basically Christianity, but they are Jewish. We'll go to the next one. Okay, so Jewish or Christian? So why, sorry, I didn't fast forward. There is some discourse about whether Messianic Judaism should be called a Jewish faith or a Christian faith. Christian evangelical groups love Messianic Judaism. Can you imagine that? Why? Because they are, and this kind of gets into Christian Zionism, the more people that are converted to Christianity, obviously, the closer we get, in some understandings, to the return of Jesus, to where we're all Christian and everybody lives together. So evangelical Christian groups love Messianic Judaism. The Jewish faith in Israel not so much. So Jewish organizations outside and inside of Israel reject Messianic Judaism, that saying that it's Jewish. And in fact, the Supreme Court of Israel rejected the claim that Messianic Judaism is Jewish, as it relates to Israeli law. So there's a law passed on July 5th, 1950, which gives Jews and people with one or more Jewish grandparent and their spouses the right to relocate to Israel and acquire Israeli citizenship. Messianic Jews are not included in this. So if you are Jewish by ethnicity, but you are a Messianic Jew, you cannot go back to Israel, according to the law. Now, non-Jews who join Messianic congregations are sometimes called spiritual Jews, completed Jews, or Messianic Gentiles, as he said. And so just by joining a Messianic Jewish congregation does not automatically make one Jewish. You are considered a Messianic Gentile. So all of us, presumably, unless someone was born ethnically Jewish here, would be Messianic Gentiles or completed Jews. And we'll get into what that means a little bit as well. Any questions before I move on? Like, did that make, yeah.
I thought it was interesting that Moshe became a Baptist minister already.
Yeah.
But now I get it, because they would welcome him.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the Southern Baptist, this Jews for Jesus is kind of came out of the Southern Baptist Convention as an evangelical arm of the church to try to convert Jewish people to Christianity. And the way he did it was to make it Jewish, but Christian.
Do Messianic Jews want to go back to Israel?
Yes.
They do want to.
Yes, and we'll get back into that. That gets back into Zionism.
So if you call yourself a Christian, you can't move to Israel.
No, not under the law. I mean, you can go live there as a,
Christian.
but you can't be under the law of the return or whatever it's called. Yeah,
There's a special, reservation.
Right.
Or if you are ethnically Jewish.
yeah.
If you converted to Judaism from Messianic, can you live there?
If you're Jewish, if you or your grandparent is Jewish, you are allowed to, but if you're not ethnically Jewish, you can't go back. So let's talk about what they believe a little bit, and then we'll see. So Messianic Jews accept Jesus Christ as the Messiah, but they contain a Jewish lifestyle, as the rabbi said. So there are notable beliefs that, and they're, as with all faiths, theology tends to vary widely among congregations and different shoots of Messianic Judaism. They do, similar to Southern Baptists and all Baptists, do adult baptism. So it's a conversion baptism. They're baptized as adults. And in the Messianic Jews use the Hebrew Bible. A lot of Messianic Jewish congregations are done in Hebrew. But they also do the New Testament, use the New Testament, or they call it the Bit Hashata right here. Where is it? Right there. That's their Jewish word for New Testament. And they believe both texts are the infallible work of God. Heavily use the Old Testament though in worship. So Christianity Jewish congregations have a rabbi, which means teacher. Next one, sorry. Messianic Jews practice that all male believers must be circumcised. Again, they're very traditionally Jewish, so all Messianic Jews are circumcised. Some observe kosher laws, some don't. It's kind of like the regular, the non-Christian Jewish. Some are Orthodox, some are not. So some practice kosher, some don't. Many Messianic Jews are charismatic and practice speaking in tongues. Again, this is because they are an offshoot of a more evangelical Pentecostal side of Christianity, that they practice some of the more spiritual gifts that those parts of Christianity do. Interestingly, the holy holidays observed by Messianic Jews includes those recognized by Judaism. So they don't practice Easter and they don't practice Christmas because they're not biblical. There's no place in the New Testament that says you should practice the resurrection of Jesus as a holy holiday or the birth of Jesus as a holy holiday. There is, in scripture, all of the Jewish holidays are practiced by the Jewish people in the Old Testament. So interesting, we kind of course, as we Americans do, take the holidays and make them not only about faith, but also about everything else, like we talked about last week. So they refer to Jesus by his Hebrew name, Yeshua, and they accept him as the Messiah, same everything else. Most Messianic Jews consider the Sabbath day to be Saturday and not Sunday, so you'll find most Messianic congregations worship on Saturday, Shabbat. They regard sin as any transgression against the Torah and is cleansed by the shed of the blood of Jesus, just like us, but the sins of the Torah are Old Testament sins. I mean, so we're going back to like, whereas as Christians, we believe that the old laws have been taken up by Jesus and we're no longer required to practice Old Testament laws. Messianic Jews still keep to the Torah and to Old Testament laws, i.e. worshiping on Saturday, practicing kosher food, that kind of thing. One more page of the, what they believe. The Trinity, same. There's Hebrew names for all of the portions of the Trinity. The only traditional, again, this is an interesting, the only traditional sacrament practiced by Messianic Judaism is baptism. And that's because it is practiced in the Bible. It is John the Baptist baptized Jesus in the Bible. They don't practice communion because communion is a re-practice of Passover. Like, right? So Jesus and his disciples practiced the Jewish holiday of Passover, which we have made into communion. So rather than take the communion, they took the Old Testament Passover. So they practiced Passover, which is also communion kind of, but they also practice baptism. They don't practice any other sacraments. And Protestants only practice those sacraments that we believe Jesus practiced. So we practice baptism, we practice communion, marriage isn't a sacrament. I think there's one more. Ordination? Just two, thank you. I was like, but the Catholic Church practices a lot more sacraments. Marriage is a sacrament. There's lots of, but as Protestants, we've taken only the sacraments that Jesus himself practiced. And the Messianic Judaism has gone back to say that even communion is of Jewish origin, which it is. So worship services, the nature of worship services differs from congregation to congregation, like it does in every religious movement. Usually prayers are read in Hebrew from the Old Hebrew Bible, and they may include songs of, they're speaking in tongues, things like that. But Messianic Jewish hymns differ a lot from evangelical Christian ones in their focus on the nation of Israel's role in the Messianic hope. And they refer to Jesus as Yeshua, the savior of Israel. And again, this gets back to Zionism. The hope is that Israel, the people of Israel and the Jewish people are the original people of God and will be the future of the salvation. And so there's a lot of focus in Messianic Judaism on Israel and Israel being the home. Messianic Jewish congregations can be very diverse, including Jews who carefully follow Jewish laws, or Jewish people have a liberal lifestyle. Christians may even choose to join a Messianic Jewish congregation. You can't read it at the bottom, but Messianic synagogues follow the same design as traditional synagogues, where sometimes they're separated men and women, sometimes they're not, but they look more like a synagogue than they do a church. You can go on the next one. Okay, we're gonna get in the weeds on theology. Has anybody heard of supersessionism? Well, we all practice supersessionism because we're all Protestant Christians. We basically espouse to the idea that it's called replacement theology, that Christianity has superseded Judaism, and that the Mosaic, this is the Moses covenant of the Hebrew Bible, has been superseded by the covenant of Jesus. Whereas salvation is brought by the grace of God and not by obedience to the Torah. So we as Christians say the Old Testament was pre-Jesus Christ. Jesus came to supersede the laws of the Old Testament, and we no longer have to practice them because Jesus has taken that upon himself. And they know that covenant is no longer valid. We have a new covenant in Jesus Christ. This is generally complemented with the concept of God having transferred the status of God's people from the Jews to the Christians. Obviously, Messianic Jews don't love that idea. And Jewish people don't love that idea, obviously. But most Protestant Christians say that God's chosen people are now Christians and those people who follow Christ. So Messianic Jews in varying degrees challenge both thoughts. In arguing for Israel's continued blessing, often cited as Romans 11:29, for God's gifts and calls are irrevocable. So the idea is that once God called Israel for now until forever. So there is no way that you were for those chosen people to not be chosen anymore because of Jesus Christ. Second, the core of supersessionism, which is the Mosaic covenant is canceled, is less agreed upon. Although following Jewish law or the mitzvah may or may not be seen as necessary, most are still followed, especially the keeping of the Sabbath and holy day. And the argument there is Jesus kept to these laws even after and when Jesus knew, recognized, taught he was Jesus, he was still Jewish. He practiced Passover. He practiced all of the things that the Jewish law required. And so, and nowhere in the New Testament does Jesus himself say, you don't have to do this anymore. It comes later when we talk about Romans, which was Paul, right? So the Messianic Jews don't love Paul. Paul was very much about, although Paul himself was Jewish, was about Gentile Christians. So anyway, there is some angst here among how Messianic Jews deal with, I would say, less conservative Christianity. So we'll get to the next slide. Is that clear as mud? I know this is so complicated, but
Here, Margaret, can I ask
yeah.
a question? You may cover this, like Google would cover this
Yeah.
really quickly. What kind of numbers are we talking in the US and Israel?
So that is really, I mean, the numbers I found between, like in the US, I found one site that says 5,000 and one site that says 120,000. Because the definition of, like I said, who is a Messianic Jew, Gentiles are not included in some counts. Gentile converts to Messianic Judaism are not included in some counts and are included in others. And depending on like different, just kind of like the PCUSA versus the PCA, like some Messianic Jewish organizations count certain congregations and some don't because they don't practice the whole of the Torah. I mean, it varies widely, but it's it's not huge, but it is growing. And there's a lot of articles recently, if you go online, about how the Messianic Jewish faith has taken, this is not the right word, but I'm just going to use it because I can't think of another, advantage of the current situation in Israel to proselytize to Israeli army officer, people, proselytize to them to try to get them to convert to Messianic Judaism.
So I would believe that you need to be a Jew first to be a Messianic Jew.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I said, some Messianic Jewish congregations will allow Gentile converts, but they never call them Jews. They always call them Messianic Gentiles or, what did I say, spiritual Jews. Yeah.
Another question though.
Yeah.
If that Jewish military person converts, that's like repudiating what Israel stands for, right?
Not according to Messianic Judaism. It's bringing into fulfillment what.
So so Israel and the leadership have it wrong when they won't be doing that either.
Right.
So
Israel is not a fan of this practice.
I'm starting to understand. Yeah.
And I guess they believe in the resurrection.
Yeah. It's just not practiced as a holiday because Jesus obviously didn't practice his own resurrection as a holiday, so. Okay, so what about Gentiles? We were just talking about this. Messianic Judaism is often presented as an ethnic church for Jews, somewhat like a Jewish a Korean Korean or Chinese church, but with outreach to specific to Jews. However, most people estimate that most Messianic Jewish congregations, only about half the members were born Jews. Then this gets back to my cousin. There is something, when you hear it before all of the political and other stuff gets in the background. There is something to be said for practicing the faith that Jesus practiced and honoring the faith that Jesus was born into, and in a real way that we don't do today as Christians. But there's so much baggage when it comes to me. It's just, so anyway, large numbers of those calling themselves Messianic Jews are not of Jewish descent, but join the movement as they enjoy the Messianic Jewish style of worship and the things that it represents. So Messianic perspectives on who is a Jew vary. This is where we kind of get into who believes what. The Messianic Jewish Rabbinical Council, which is kind of like the PCUSA of this faith, acknowledges a Jew as one born to a Jewish mother or who has converted to Judaism. So they're a little bit more liberal. Copying from the Reform stream of Judaism, the council also recognizes a Jew one who was born of a Jewish father but not of a Jewish mother, on the condition that the family of the child or the individual as an adult has undertaken public and formal acts of identification. Again, you should kind of like have to become a Jewish person. This council, MJA, Messianic Jewish American Association, accepts Gentiles into their congregations, but views Gentiles and Jews as spiritually distinct and conversion as an unbiblical practice. So you're allowed to join a Messianic Jewish congregation, but you are never going to be a Jew.
I always wondered what, with Sammy Davis Jr., he converted to
Yeah.
Judaism, was he Messianic or what?
I don't know. I'm assuming I think he just converted to like true Judaism and like it didn't keep the
I'm
Jesus
sure.
of it. We go to the next one. Okay, so this is really long, but the Messianic Jewish Rabbinical Council, and you should look it up, but it talks about, there's a twofold constitution of Jews and Gentiles, and we've gone through this. There are the Messianic Jews who are ethnically Jewish, and then the Messianic Jews who are ethnically Gentile, and never the two shall cross. And it is necessary for the Messianic Jews who are Jewish to retain their Jewish ethnicity in order for salvation of Israel to happen. Israel needs to maintain Israel because Israel was the core of God's chosen people, and Israel has to stay as Israel and can't become the other. But Messianic Jews believe we need both in order for true salvation. So, yeah, there's a lot. So this is like the most important people. For this reason, the Messianic Jewish community is called to live as an integral part of the Jewish people, mediating Jesus' holiness to the rest of Israel. So they're called, Messianic Jews are called to prophesy only to other Jewish people. While the Gentile Messianic Jewish community is called to serve as a Messianic extension of Israel among the nations of the world. So all of us, if we convert to Messianic Judaism, are supposed to talk about Messianic Judaism to our Gentile friends. We are not supposed to try to convert Jews to Messianic Judaism. That's the Messianic Jewish people's role. It's like, okay. Gentile conversion, we're gonna get into this a little bit, sorry. There is, again, there's two different, some people allow conversion and some people say you're allowed to come worship with us, but you're never gonna be part of us. There's this thing called one law theology, which is also known as one Torah for all. This claim says that Gentiles are commanded by God to observe the Torah in the same way as Jewish people. And a key word of this is Numbers 15:16. There will be one law for you and for the foreigner who resides with you. So this says that if a Gentile is going to convert to Messianic Judaism, they also have to practice all the laws of the Torah. Like they have to become in everything but ethnicity Jewish. Some have argued against the one law movement, insisting on Gentiles being required to observe the entirety of the Torah. They argue that after Peter related his experience and James made the final call, he clearly delineated that the Torah was given to the Jewish people, and nobody has been able to say yet why the Gentiles have to practice it. So you can go back to Acts and hear that whole debate. It's a big New Testament debate. Do the Gentiles have to practice Torah? Subsequently, the Bible set out 4 main requirements in a letter to Gentile believers that's saying that these are the only things we as Gentiles have to practice from the Torah. Abstain from anything connected to idolatry, sexual immorality, eating an animal that has been strangled, and we have to not drink blood. So those are the four things that that people who don't practice one law theology say, that only, this is the only thing Gentiles have to do in order to be Messianic Jewish converts, which we all do anyway, I hope. I don't know about the eating the animal that's been strangled. I don't do that much research on my, but, then there's a two-house theology. Proponents of the two-house theology believe that the house of Judah in scripture refers to the Jewish Israel, and then the house of Israel refers to the 10 lost tribes of Israel. And the 10 lost tribes of Israel are all of us. And the house of Judah is Israel proper, is Jewish, the ethnically Jewish nation. And so this two-house theology says that and this is what the rabbi talked about, is that we, as this lost tribes of Israel, will be regrafted into the olive tree of Israel, and we will become one, but we are distinct two different house. So there's a lot. Israel's government and many Jewish scholars and leaders have just decried two-house theology as anti-Semitic, as it does not uphold Jewish as a singular identity and sole right to the land of Israel. This is where we're gonna get into Zionism. We're not gonna get there yet, but I'm just telling you that the Israeli government hates Messianic Judaism. They hate this idea because the idea is that we were all, whether or not we were in the house of Judah or the house of Israel, part of the original God's chosen people, Israel. And that we all are going to come together at the end to be regrafted onto the olive tree of Israel and be saved. The Israeli government and most Jewish people would say that these are the same, these are both Jewish. Gentiles have nothing to do with this. And that Israel is only those who are ethnically Jewish. Any question? I'm not getting political, I'm just giving you facts. Yeah, next. Okay, so the Jewish reaction to Messianic Judaism we just talked about is that the Jewish understanding is that a future Messiah will restore the kingdom immediately and not at some future apocalyptic age as we believe. So that's why Jews who are Jewish and do not espouse to Messianic Judaism do not believe that Jesus is the Messiah, because when the Messiah comes, it is going to happen like that. Not this, oh, the Messiah came 2,000 years ago and it's like we're slowly working our way into like salvation and the second coming. No, it's going to happen all at once. So they think, if this is the Messiah, why didn't it happen? That's the big reason that so they obviously are not Messianic Jews. The Jewish community objects to the title Messianic Judaism because the Messianism practiced by Messianic Jews is Jesus focused and thus by definition not Jewish. The use of the term Messianic Judaism strikes many as a subversive way of attracting Jews who do not know enough about their faith to realize that what they're learning about is Christianity. This is what gets to what I was talking to about proselytizing to Israeli soldiers. Just like in every country, there are people who don't know a lot about their faith. And just because you live in Israel and are Jewish doesn't mean necessarily that you know a lot about what it is to be a Jewish person. So some feel like the Messianic Jews are taking advantage of Jews, ethnically Jewish people who don't know a lot about practicing Judaism and telling them about Messianic Judaism as if it is a Jewish faith. And so suddenly they become believers in Jesus when they didn't realize it. So, okay. What time is it? Time to get it. Okay, good. We're gonna have plenty of time for questions. So I'm studying they're talking next week about Zionism, which has to do with whether or not Israel is the home of the Jewish people, nation. And there's an ethnic component to that, there's a religious component to that, there's a political component to that. And this little piece of land has been fought about since the beginning of time. I am talking about Christian Zionism, which is different. The idea of Christian Zionism, okay, so Zionism initially emerged in Central and Eastern Europe in the late 19th century as a modern understanding, both in reaction to newer waves of anti-Semitism and as a consequence of, I don't know what that word is, or Jewish Enlightenment. So there's this regrowth of from Jewish scholars to say, yes, this is the Jewish homeland, we all have to come home, this needs to happen, and when we do all come home back to Zion, then that's gonna usher in this new age and the Messiah will come. And so there's this whole idea, we gotta bring all the Jews back to Israel. We have to do this from now it's a lot of political, but it is also the spiritual perspective, like this is the Jewish homeland and we have to get everybody back here in order for us to be ready for the Messiah. The main goal is creating a homeland in Palestine. This process was seen by the Zionist movement as an ingathering of exiles, an effort to put a stop to the exoduses and persecution that have marked Jewish history by bringing the Jewish people back to their historic homeland. Again, this is going back to those two houses of Israel, House of Judah and the House of Israel. So those 10 lost tribes are lost. Some people think that those are the Jews who were dispersed, who now live in all parts of the world, and those lost tribes need to come home. This two-house theology believes that those 10 lost tribes are us. Israel does not believe that, but so all these lost tribes need to return to their homeland. Since the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, Zionism has continued primarily to advocate on behalf of Israel and to address threats to its continued existence and security. So why do Christians care so much about Zionism, and why do we have a geopolitical, I don't really want to be political, affinity for Israel? Christian Zionism holds that the founding of the State of Israel in 1948 was in accordance with the Bible prophecy, and that the reestablishment of the Jewish sovereignty in the Levant, or this place, is the eschatological ingathering of Israel, and you can't read the bottom of it, but the prerequisite for the second coming of Jesus Christ. So we as some there is some understanding that it is our responsibility as Christians to facilitate the state of Israel and to restore Israel to their home, the promised land. And when we do that, when we assist doing that, that will usher in the second coming of Jesus Christ. The Jews obviously believe it will usher in the Messiah, the first Messiah, the Messiah. As Christians, we believe that, some believe that that will usher in the second coming. The difficulty comes when some of those Christians who espouse the returning of the Jews to Israel also secondarily believe that if they do not convert to Christianity, ultimately, when this happens, they will not be part of the saved. So it's a little self-serving, like we got to get you guys back to Israel so that Jesus will come again for us. But unless you come on our side once you get there, sorry, thanks for helping us out. So there's a lot of Christian Zionism is there are other Christian faiths who believe that well, there's several. Some believe that the Jews themselves will have to convert to Christianity during the second coming to get saved. Some believe that they will be automatically converted by the salvation of Jesus that's beyond their own ability to convert. And some believe because they are Israel, the original God's chosen people, it's not necessary that they believe that Jesus was the Son of God, and they will be taken up because they were the OG Old Testament people. So there's different levels of way Christian Zionism works, but ultimately it is to the benefit of Christians to get, the understanding is, it is to the benefit of Christians to get Jews back to Israel. Which also helps Israel, right? Even if you don't happen to believe that. Most Jewish people who are returning to Israel do not believe that they're returning to help the Christians out. But Christian Zionism would believe that was, yeah.
When you say Christians want this, which Christian, who are you calling that?
Well, so there's no particular denomination that would, but the more conservative Christian denominations would be along the line, those who support Christian Zionism.
And I have recognized that and have always wondered why, but this makes sense now. I wonder why the more conservative groups would be, supportive of the whole Jewish.
Yes. And so Messianic Jews, getting back to our original topic, Messianic Jews love Zionism because they're hitting it all, like not only are we Jewish ethnically, we're God's original chosen people, but once we get there, we're already Christian and Jesus is gonna come again. And the Messianic Jewish understanding is they have to convert every Jewish Israeli to Messianic Judaism in order to bring back the Messiah. Bring back the Messiah, not bring the Messiah, because they believe that Jesus already came, right? So there is a lot of happening in this tiny piece of the world, especially Messianic Jews that who are themselves ethnically Jewish, but not welcomed in their country because their goal is to proselytize, to spread Christianity, not Christianity, Messianic Judaism to the Jewish people. But it all goes back to Zionism and getting everybody back to the land, getting the Jews back to the land of Israel so that, that the Messiah or Jesus, the original Messiah, I don't know how you want to say it, the Jewish Messiah will come or that Jesus will come again. So, and I tried to stay out of the fray. Y'all can get into the fray next week because there is, I think, a little bit, for me, Christian Zionism is a little bit more fraught than even some of the political stuff because it has to do with our own faith and what we believe in terms of our brothers and sisters who are Jewish. So I tried to like tiptoe into it. There's a lot. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Well, I mean, Israel was established by other governments.
Right.
And was this, the religious aspects of it, was that part of the discussion of these?
Yes.
I mean, it was the Brits and us and the United Nations got into it.
Yeah, no Western person would say that they were a Christian Zionist but there is an understanding that it benefited geopolitically, it benefited the West, and that there was some understanding that there was an eschatological part of getting the Jews back to Israel that helped Christianity out. Nobody's going to own up to that when it was happening, but that's why Christian Zionism is so fraught, because basically you're saying to the Jewish people, yes, we want you back in your land, but only because it helps us.
I mean, there was also a practical solution.
Right.
There were hundreds of thousands
Right,
of
and
Jews that were dislocated.
Right, and you had the whole, exactly, but then it goes even further back than that, then you have the lost tribes of Israel, and why were they gone from the land in the first place? Because the anti-Semitism has been happening since the beginning of time, and, it's, yeah. Yeah.
When you talk about the difference between the Messianic Christians and the Messianic Jews, is there a power struggle within that faith? And like, do you see in the growth of that, is it growing faster among Messianic Jews or faster among Messianic Christians?
That's a lot of what you'll read is about this. There's a lot of debate now among Messianic Jewish congregations about Gentile converts because they're having so many. And I think it's a reaction to the I don't know if we're to the growing conservatism, and the just general moving apart of everything in this country, political, social, and religious. And so there's a yearning for even those really conservative evangelical Christians to get back to the core of what it is to follow Jesus, and according to them, the definition of following Jesus is literally practicing the religion that Jesus practiced. And so that there's a lot of interest among Gentiles or non-Jewish people in Messianic Judaism for that reason. Because again, this whole what would Jesus do? That whole movement, what would Jesus do? Jesus would practice Passover. Jesus would, practice kosher diet. Jesus would. So it's a very much of the Messianic Jewish, ethnically Jewish people appreciate that, but they're not looking for it. Of course, they'd love to have more people in their pews on Sunday like the rest of us were, but they wish they were Jewish. The original intent was that they were Jewish, not Gentiles. It is interesting that my cousin, I was saying, who is converted he's a Messianic Gentile now, has his whole family, his family's still Southern Baptist, his wife, but they're, he wants their whole family to practice kosher. He's in keeping a kosher kitchen, eating kosher, he goes to worship on Saturday. So it is like a true lifestyle change. It's being Jewish, but believing in Jesus.
So why did are you gonna tell us that?
Well, no, I think it's again, going back to this whole idea, like getting to the core of who Jesus was and following
Right.
Jesus.
Personally, was there any certain thing that happened that caused him to?
I don't know. I haven't gotten into, yeah.
That's, I'm just
I
curious.
think if you go deep enough in scripture and start reading and you realize like even the devotional this morning, the Gospel of John was written decades after Jesus was alive. And that's the earliest, really. The earliest, like first person account of Jesus' life, not John, but the Gospels. Paul is really the earliest, but Paul really didn't know Jesus. So, like I said, I think there is something to understanding and recognizing and honoring the faith of Jesus in ways that we don't do. Understanding what Passover, none of us, we practice communion, but we don't really at the core understand what Passover is and like look at a Passover Seder and understand all the things and do all that. Not to say we have to, but yeah. Anyone else? Do y'all want to are you talking about Christian Zionism at all next week?
No.
I don't think
Let's
so.
talk about Zionism,
Yeah,
and how that was founded and how that helped create.
yeah, the state of Israel.
The two books that we read did not mention this.
Yeah.
It's really the Arab and Jew.
Yeah,
Yes. Islam and
right.
Judaism.
And this, I think the thing that bothers me about Christian Zionism is that, again, at the core, it's really self-serving and does not speak to Israelis or Palestinians as people of their own ethnicity and rights, and it's what can you do for us?
Is there, and I think this is obvious when you say that it's a lot of conservative Christians, but is there among Messianic Judaism a deep literal understanding of scripture? They take everything as it was written.
Yeah, there is, just like in Jewish Judaism. There are rabbis who do the ringlets and, it is as Messianic Judaism can be as conservative as Orthodox Judaism if practiced by an Orthodox Messianic community. It can also be really liberal, like a liberal Jewish community. It just depends, there are ranges, like that. And I think, I appreciate that, they got away from Jews for Jesus, and have gotten into the Messianic Judaism, although Messianic Judaism for Jewish people had a lot more problems, but Jews for Jesus was just a little, I don't know if y'all heard about that when it was happening, but just felt a little bit too yay, rah, rah, and not, when I heard about it, when I was in seminary, I thought it was just like Jewish people who appreciated Christians. But they weren't themselves converting. Messianic Judaism kind of is a fuller picture of what they're actually doing, is converting to Christianity.
Like Jesus freaks back when I was.
Right, Jesus freaks, yeah, exactly. And, I think the Messianic Judaism has always been practiced in Israel, not named as such, but there have always been people who live in Israel who are ethnically Jewish who believe in Jesus Christ. It happened, it happened right after Jesus. All of the people that Jesus prophetized to, like he said, were Jewish. And so this movement is not a new movement. It just, because of everything else that was happening geopolitically around that area, hasn't been, in the forefront.
So when did it become a thing?
It always has been. It's just like, yeah. It's just, it wasn't named as such, and it didn't have the organization around it.
And so what do they call their house of worship?
The synagogue.
Okay, so when did so does it have a name on the front of the synagogue, like this is a Messianic Jewish?
Yeah, I assume so. I don't know. I don't think there's one in Charlotte. Oh, there is?
outfit with Israel Messianic Congregation.
Oh, good.
Oh,
I didn't even look that up. I just assumed there wasn't. Where is it?
I'm not sure, I thought it was in meeting that said that they had been a church.
Okay. They didn't have their own. Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
do they have a creed? I mean, they wouldn't accept the Apostles' Creed, but do they have a creed that states what they believe?
I think it's really just the Torah. I didn't look into that, but I think they really just keep to like the Torah, the Old Testament. And I would assume, this is just an assumption I'm making, that they would also recognize all of the other Jewish writings that have been made, they're not called mikvahs, maybe they are. You know, the rabbis, yeah, have continually written these.
Yeah.
I would assume they would keep to all of those as well, yeah, yeah.
Years ago, I had a bunch of friends that were going to a women's Bible study out at Southern Evangelical Seminary
Mhm.
and said how wonderful the professor was. So I went along with them, but the professor switched to a Messianic Jew. And I just thank God every day that I'd had plenty of Bible study before I got there.
Right.
Because when he started talking about replacement theology that we all had, my brain just went tilt.
Yeah,
And just several things, and then we had the book of Revelation, and my brain really went.
yeah,
And I told my friends, I said, I gotta get out of here, there's something totally wrong with this.
Right.
It's just totally wrong.
right,
And I suggest y'all follow me.
yeah,
And they didn't follow me right away, but then they all.
yeah,
Well, Revelation is a very deep
yeah,
book,
Well, I
And-
more than any of them.
had it with Reformed theology, so I didn't believe a
Yeah.
thing that he was saying.
Yeah.
It was just off
Yeah.
the wall. It got worse and worse.
well, the interesting thing for us as Protestant Christians and this whole idea of Messianic Judaism, and not one that we need to answer today or will ever really answer, but, you know, it really comes back to the question of this idea of supersessionism or replacement theology is what is happening to Israel with the birth of Jesus and the resurrection. So do we believe as Christians that the Jewish people will should ultimately convert to Christianity in order to be saved? Or do we believe that because they were part of the original covenant with Moses, that covers their salvation and that conversion is not necessary? Obviously, Messianic Jews believe that conversion is necessary, and that's why they evangelize to Jewish people. There are varying degrees of understanding about that among Christians. Some believe that supersessionism, that replacement theology we talked about, is real, and Jews, ethnically religious Jews, must convert in some real way, external way, to be saved. And some believe, like I said, when we talked about Christian Zionism, that conversion will happen without their participation, cooperation by God's divine grace. And some believe it doesn't need to happen at all, that they were covered in the original covenant. So I'm not gonna ask you what you think, but you can think about it. The question also applies to non-Christians too, right? Like, do we believe that everybody has to be converted to Christianity before and when the eschatology happens?
Well, as a Southern Baptist growing up, I was taught that.
Yeah, oh yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
if they still believe.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So, it makes me think of the book of Hebrews
Uh-huh,
and, how, of course, that really focused on Christ-centeredness, but it was to the Hebrews and there is a lot about, it talks about how Abraham was saved by faith and all these people,
right,
but it was faith in God.
right.
Abraham didn't know Jesus, but it was faith in God, so he had the faith, and I don't know, that's what I think.
Yeah, and there are really, there are some people who would say, but Abraham didn't know he knew about Jesus, but he knew.
Right.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, my father was an English professor at the college I went to, and he produced and had a play about the Abraham-Isaac story.
yeah,
About the sacrifice of Isaac.
yeah, yeah,
And, Sarah becoming a pillar of salt.
Right. Yeah, that's great.
So,
There is, I mean, again, this goes back to that Christian Zionism we have is, you know, if you, what happens at the end? I mean, luckily, I think for me, this is just an indicative. For me, the thing that I love about our Reformed theology, since we're all Presbyterians, presumably we're all Reformed, is that we are able to say, that's not my job. Thank goodness it's not my job, and God has got that taken care of, and I don't have to worry about it. All I'm called to do is love my neighbor and love God, and as you know, my neighbor is everybody, and so if I had to work out my own salvation, much less anybody else's salvation, I would be in a tough situation. So that's where I leave it, is that it's not my job, thank goodness. Anything else? Yeah.
One thing about the symbol they have in Messianic Judaism, the tradition, the start of the
Yeah.
There's not a cross.
No.
So what is their theology on the cross?
Well, I mean, they do believe in the death and resurrection. Again, they kind of practice this idea that it is the faith of Jesus. And so the cross is not, kind of going back to the sacraments, it's not, wasn't revered as a, you know, Jesus, the loaves and fishes was kind of like one of the miracles that Jesus himself performed. So that seems very first person, and the cross was, you know, a punishment of the Roman government, and not therefore Christian, Jewish, whatever you want to say. Yeah. Again, they don't practice Easter. It's just not important. It is important, but not a holiday, not a practiced holy day. Anything else? Okay. Good luck next week, guys.